Hello and welcome to another episode of the Trash Talk Podcast. I'm my host, Sergej, and with me to have Sergej. We'll keep that in.
Yes. Hello.
Today,
I'm doing fine, by the way. How are you?
all right. I threw myself. I completely threw myself off. We're already doing great. I'm apparently a bit flustered, but I'm doing fine. Today's topic is
That's good.
online learning versus offline. There's probably going to be some other distinctions we draw, but Sergej had some thoughts about it, and we want to talk about those. Sergej, thoughts?
Yeah. Oh no, putting me on the spot right here.
I know you have stuff to say because you've already told me some of it.
I guess. Okay. So one thing I kind of recently realized is that I kind of prefer learning stuff that is not necessarily offline, as like you had the distinction, like online versus offline, but more that it's structured and that it's regular. And also kind of sort of forcing me to attend.
Yeah, I understand where that comes from. At the same time, very hot take.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like a lot of people default to that sort of learning.
Mm-hmm.
I think in theory, self-motivated learning is the best, and that necessarily, or almost necessarily, would mean like a sort of less structured, sort of more typical online approach. The problem with the self-motivated thing is that you have to maintain that motivation.
Is you have to be self-motivated. Yeah, you have to be self-motivated in the first place.
And that's rough. I mean, I feel like starting is usually half some motivation. You know, you want to do something, you get started, and it lasts for about a week.
Like maybe a couple of weeks if you're really sticking to it.
Yeah, but I do think it is true that it often helps with something to keep you motivated. And obviously having, like, for example, a course to go to is probably going to be that motivation. But even if nothing is necessarily, strictly speaking, forcing you to go there, I feel like just, like, once you've sort of committed to going, it's going to be weird not to go, right? Especially because I used to have this problem when I was learning French, when I wanted to do something, like, every day, right? That's kind of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the question is, right, if you don't set a fixed time, it's still not necessarily going to happen every day. Because it's like, and whoops, day's over. It's not optimal to do something like, at like 5 a.m. just before you go to bed. Okay, I'm weird. But, the point is, right, you're like really tired, you're just about to go to bed, and like, let's knock out some friends. It's not going to stick very well, first of all. It's going to be harder because you can't focus as well. It's just not a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
People say first thing in the morning. Same thing, to be honest. Like, I'm not going to be very awake first thing in the morning. But yeah, no, it's like once you have...
It takes me like half an hour to wake up, so... And by that time, I'm already scrolling through the internet. And...
Yeah, I mean, I think... if I, brush my teeth and eat some breakfast, I'm probably going to be fine after that. But I'm still not going to be very motivated necessarily to, like, just go out there and do that, right? Much less if you have something actual that you're getting up for, which is, like, if you're getting up for, like, school or work or whatever, right? It's like, yeah, great, let me get up half an hour earlier so I can, like, no. Yes, maybe for some people, definitely. I'm not going to say that it's like categorically bad, because it's actually very good, because once you're getting, especially if you're like working, right, it's like, yeah, let's do it afterward. Great idea, right? I mean, it depends on what you work, of course, but optimally, the learning would be enjoyable in and of itself, and then thereby, but you might still need mental energy to do it, and especially if you have a mentally demanding job, that doing the mentally demanding thing first makes sense. But yeah, no, I definitely, I noticed that when I was trying to do it at around the same time every day, and it's like, well, but some days there's something happening at that time, and it's like, oh, great, right? I think I tried different things where for like the French learning thing, and I was like, oh yeah, in the evening, and then it's like, oh yeah, but I mean back then it would be like, oh yeah, like Alex was like, yeah, coming over recording some videos. It's like, well, great, right? Like now that is right when I would have been doing that, and and so it's terrible to like find a regular time. And so if you have like a fixed appointment, like even if it's like a once a week thing, it's like, hey, that time that because you're not going to plan anything at the same time. It feels silly to be like, hey, you can't come over tonight. I'm doing Duolingo, right? Like that. No. But like, oh no, I've got my language course tonight, right? I'm going to the school or whatever, like church basement. What do I know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's actually AA meetings around church basements, not language classes, but you know,
I don't know, but that definitely feels more tangible and more excusable.
Yeah, right. Because it's like it's an actual thing, and also like other people are scheduling the time around it, so it's not like you could just move it. Where if you are just doing it by yourself, like even if you were to set a fixed time, it still feels kind of silly to be like, I'm inconveniencing possibly other people to like adhere to the schedule that has no like tangible reason except to keep me accountable.
Mm-hmm.
And optimally, you just be like, hey, I'll just quickly knock it out before or whatever. But it depends on how much you do, what you do, right? Like sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
This was when you start talking again.
Yeah. I mean, another thing that I also kind of realized also sort of recently is that when I don't have anything structured to go off of, just having like a goal that is somewhat close is immensely helpful in actually doing something instead of just postponing the learning.
Goals are tricky.
Yes. It doesn't work for everything. Like, you cannot really set a goal for learning a language. But, for example, like learning a technology, like I recently learned Kubernetes, the whole server deployment stuff. That's like kind of complicated, but once you understand the basics, it's kind of simple.
A lot of tech things are.
Getting to those basics, yes, but getting to those basics, it like takes a while. And it's not easy to come by like a good overview of like all the different things it can do.
Yeah, no, I remember, and maybe not quite the same thing, but when we did networking stuff in college, right, there was this practical networking class, and it's like, a lot of that stuff in there, like, especially towards the end, like, felt fairly easy. But damn, like, those systems are not intuitive at all. But like, once you know how to use them, and you use them with some degree of regularity, I mean, I probably couldn't do most of what I did back then now, because it's been a couple years, but like, yeah, no, that, like, is really easy once you know how to do it.
Oh yeah. And like the same thing here, like I set a couple goals or got goals from someone else to like deploy a small, for example, Minecraft server on a server that like automatically restarts, has a persistent world and everything. And it's not trivial to do that, but it's also not super complicated. So it's a goal that you can reach with like reasonable effort in a relatively short amount of time.
Yeah, I guess
and it also keeps you focused on like actual problems that you encounter on the way.
Yeah, for language learning, there's sort of two types of goals, right? There is these sort of ability-based goals, which those are not necessarily impossible, but they're in some cases hard to quantify, right? Like if people are like, I want to reach like B1, it's like, what does it even mean, right? Like sometimes there are like language exams, and some language learners like swear by like taking exams, so like just to like have a goal to work towards, and then to see how well they actually progress. and often I'm just like basically taking exams for fun, which takes a special kind of person. I mean, like, no shade, but like that's just not for everyone.
Yeah.
Where's it going? Right. But also there are like the ability-based goals that are like more easily measurable. Where it's like, oh yeah, I want to be able to read a book, right? And like, sure, there's a little bit wishy-washy, like, what's a book? What does read mean, right? But realistically, after you've read a book, you'll be able to know that you've read the book, right? Like there's like, and if you read an instruction manual, well, actually, those are more complicated most of the time. But oh god, like if someone's learning English and you want to get like an instruction manual, preferably from a Chinese company. Those are sometimes incomprehensible as it is.
That is so true.
Right, so build the best goals, right? Like I want to be able to hold a conversation, I want to be able to read a book, right? Those sort of things are easily measurable, but it's very hard to estimate how long it will take to get there. And so it's really a lot harder to work towards those. Other people set goals that are just purely based on, I guess, performance, you could say, or like effort. I don't know. Like the idea of like, oh yeah, I want to like spend 100 days. Well, I guess that's not good. Like 100 hours learning the language, right? I want to like do an hour a day for 100 days, right? Something like that. And for some people, those sort of goals are motivation enough, right? I tend to struggle with those. As well as I tend to struggle with a lot of those.
I do too.
One thing that I think worked really well for me, until it did the exact opposite, which is, I mentioned Duolingo, right? And say what you will about Duolingo, but there are some good things about it, and I think the streaks can work well as motivation. Because then you have to like do something every day, lest you lose your streak. Well, the streak freezes and blah blah. In theory, you're supposed to do it every day, and even with streak freezes, those only freeze for a day, so you get a bit of a buffer. Thing is, right? Once you build your like 150 days. I mean,
at least at the start, you get them like for everything. The streak freezes.
Yeah, you get them easily, but they still only freeze for a day, and I think you can only have 1 or 2 at most at a time. So if you don't log in
two at the same time,
okay, 2. So if you don't log in for 3 days, you still lose the streak.
That is true.
Point being, right? Like the streak is very motivating until you lose it. I don't know. I feel like it can be motivating. It's obviously an arbitrary thing, but like, I play video games. I'm like very programmed to like do daily tasks and shit. Or like, yeah, sure. I do my dailies.
I mean, you play those types of video games with daily tasks.
Yeah.
I don't.
I do my dailies.
For me personally, on Duolingo, the leaderboards unexpectedly were so much more motivating than the streaks.
The leaderboards are a mixed bag. I mean, first of all, like getting first rank on Blizzard Obsidian, the highest, is
I don't know.
Time and Obsidian, one of those. But it's like actually kind of rough because there are people that actually like focus their whole lives basically on getting on leaderboards, and like they'll do shit like complete easy stories over and over again rather than actually learning the language, which makes leaderboards very meaningless. But yeah, not at the very least not dropping down a league, and like once you're like getting in the top league and then not dropping down, like getting a promotion and stuff. Like that definitely. I mean, I stayed in whatever the top league is. I think I stayed in the top league throughout the whole time. That I also have my streak, right? So like that definitely does play into it a little bit. It was
That's pretty good.
Not that it motivated me to log in every day because that was more of the streak. But then when I noticed that I was like at the bottom and I was gonna get demoted, or like I was very close to getting demoted, we're like, you know what, let's do a little bit more, right? And because I never like I don't want to say cheated, but like I never really cheeses it, right? So like I always like, if I got my points, I earned them, okay? And so that did mean that I would learn a bit more. I mean, granted, it wasn't the only site I used, right? So eventually I just stopped using Duolingo. I used Memrise as well, which is a more of a flashcard type site, although they're not that different. It has structured courses that are already pre-built. It doesn't do the Duolingo thing where it like remixes the sentences every time, but Yeah, and I did some close master, and I did all of the free websites basically. Well, I mean, I think it's just those three, but I did a lot of the free websites. I did YouTube videos. Like I did a bunch of stuff, and eventually, you understand language good well enough that you watch documentaries or something. Documentaries, by the way, a pro tip for language learners, right? I swear by documentaries, much better than like fiction or something like that. Not necessarily like because they're better content, but just because they're like actually meant to be understood. And you don't get the thing that you get oftentimes, especially in like modern fiction, where you get like this is the dialogue and an explosion, and like I don't know how good the dynamic range of the recording is, but also I compress it so that Anyways, it's very you like can hardly understand what people are saying because it's like background noises. It's like, why would you mix your... I get that it's technically more realistic, but like, why would you mix your audio so I don't understand what the characters... But I mean, even besides that, like, narrative media oftentimes isn't necessarily structured to be understood. Like, documentaries want you to understand what they're talking about. Like, that's the whole purpose of the program. And so, they might reiterate important points or like try to phrase things so they can be easily understood, right? So if they introduce specialized vocabulary, they'll probably explain it. Not because it's vocab, but it's because scientific terminology or something. And it's like, you might not know this. And so I personally find documentaries very useful. That is relevant, but it's not really what we're talking about. But I find something... Also, like, usually I would, like, do my Duolingo and, like, then do something else right afterwards, right? So it's like, that's sort of just the, like, to get you in there, to like get you doing something, and then of course for language learning, it's also like subscribe to some channels on YouTube that make content either about the language or just in the language once you're good enough. And it's like, oh, there's a new video. I guess I'll watch the video, right? And so that is also one of those things where you don't really need the motivation, but it's like it just like it's right there in front of you.
Exploiting that YouTube addiction, I like that.
I mean, I'm not going to deny that. I watch a lot of YouTube. But, it's that thing, right? Where,
way too much.
Like those things that you do anyways, right? You can integrate languages into it very easily. Now, that might not be the only thing you want to learn. And so then it becomes a bit more complicated, right? Like if you want to learn how to do server deployment, right? You could possibly subscribe to some YouTube channels that talk about that, but like... And also, unlike language learning...
Less useful.
You can't just watch anything about the topic, right? You'd have to like follow some sort of structure, probably. I think courses are a good thing. I do also like online courses, but that's... When you get like the whole like... your Brilliance of the world or whatnot, where it's like... It has like lessons that follow onto one another, but you can do them at any pace. It's a cool concept. But you have the motivation problem again.
Yeah.
Because that's the other advantage of structure, right? It's not just like the motivation thing, but it's also the curation, right? Where it's sometimes hard to figure out what you should learn next in a certain subject matter.
Oh, yeah.
And again, for languages, I would say it's just enough exposure to the language and you will eventually pick up on things, right? And you probably, like, unless you have an actual question, you probably don't need to, like, look up too many specific things, right? If you're like, hey, why does this word sometimes is different? Like, why is this word different in that context? And you have to, like, learn about noun cases or something. Or just verb conjugation, because English doesn't have it. Kind of, sort of, a third person does have it, but, like, present tense verbs in English only conjugate in the third person, all the other ones have the same. And the third person is just an extra S at the end. I do, you do, he does. Like that whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still conjugation. I mean, tense is also technically conjugation, so, your whole do, did, has done, I don't know. I don't know how to, like, properly list some of those. Like, how there's, like, a very specific way that, like, English books will always list them, where, like, the present tense and then, like, the two different past tenses. It's like, flow, flew, flown or something. I don't know. The flown's passive, isn't it? But, like they sit, sat, like those sort of... and it's like there's a very specific way that I was someone. It's like you don't actually need to know that. You just need to know how to use them.
That is true.
I guess the trick for self-motivating is just, finding a reason to be motivated, right? So having a daily routine or weekly or whatever, but having a regular routine associated with it. You can do the whole bundling thing where you tighten something that you would already do. So it's like, like when I get home from jogging, as if, then I put on my lesson, right? And that sort of a thing. So I think you can build the same structure for the purposes of sticking with it that you get from an actual course. And then you can still, to some degree, go at your own pace, right? So you can, if you just didn't get the last lesson, you just do it again the next time. Or if you, just blew through a lesson, you can just do the next one already, right? So you're not as... Because if you have a tutor, you can also do that. But if you're in, a class setting, which is, most people probably, then you're just kind of stuck with what they're doing. Also, by the way... classes just oftentimes are not necessarily built around the idea of you only showing up in class. Then it's often good to just also do stuff yourself anyways. Right? Even if it's just to reinforce the lessons from the class. But I feel like that's the thing that you hear a lot with language classes where people will go to evening classes for learning a language once a week for an hour for 5 years and still barely speak the language. And it's yeah. Because you had 1 hour of exposure every week. That's not gonna do that much. You might want to actually, do something in your own time as well. But even then,
watch some documentaries.
Having that minimum still is helpful sometimes, right? Because at least you're not fully falling off, right? Because once you're falling off, it's a lot harder to get back into it than to just go down to the minimum, coast for a while, and then ramp back up again.
That is also true. You'll forget really fast stuff that you don't actively do anymore.
Yeah, that, and also just the habit thing, right? Where, if you're, completely out of it, even if you could get back into it fairly easily, there's, that mental element of, now I've already not done it for a while. So there's, in a sense, less pressure to do it. Unless you actually have to do it for some reason, but that is a whole other kind of worms, of course. And there is obviously sometimes that thing where oh shit, I haven't done this in a while. Where do I even begin? What do I do? Right? With a lot of the self-taught stuff, it's hey, there's a million of things I could be doing. I maybe had something that worked for me, but I fell off. So do I want to do the same thing again, or do I want to try something that maybe works better? And great, right? Now you're basically back at square one in terms of methodology, even if your actual knowledge might not be back at square one. It's yeah, fuck.
Yeah. You have anything more to say?
I think I hit on most of the stuff that I thought about beforehand. Because we mentioned before we started recording, when we planned this, the whole structure was unstructured thing is one of the bigger points. And my first thought when you said that was oh yeah, you could build your own structure, but I was I'll wait until we actually record to say that. But I think it was the main thing, right? You have the structure was unstructured, versus unstructured thing, and also the advantage of structured courses is not just for when you learn, but also what you learn. I don't think I have much else to say. I think I hit on all of the different sort of distinctions that I came up with. Obviously, you could also apply the same thing offline, right? Where you don't... we said classes and we kind of implied offline, but obviously online classes exist, even ones that are regularly scheduled. And inversely, you can also learn by yourself in the library if you feel like it. It's probably less practical than on the internet, to be honest. The advantage is you're going to the library. Now you're at a dedicated place for studying, rather than on your computer.
You're not going to be easily distracted.
or on your phone because people. Phones actually worse than computers for this sort of thing. Well, sort of, because messages, right?
They really are.
Notifications. Yeah. I mean, I do technically get notifications for like Discord messages on PC, but also like I really don't get them in Discord messages, honestly. Like,
also, I'm kind of still surprised how you can live without like a proper modern smartphone.
I don't see why people need it so bad. Like, I don't need to always be accessible to people, right? Like if you want something from me, you can wait until I get home. The one thing that I could maybe occasionally use, but I'm not really often in situations where that is relevant, would be like a map. But I mean, you can get an actual physical paper map, but let's face it, right? Paper maps, kind of shit, right? Like, they did the job when there was no alternative. But like...
That is true.
Getting out a paper map, and then following down the street, and then all of a sudden it just, like, doesn't exist anymore. You know? Or like, you're going up into a roundabout,
or there's like a whole new...
Here.
Yeah.
Like, well, okay, the streets is ceasing to exist now.com, but sometimes you have like the thing where it's like, there's like a sign that's like, oh yeah, no, it's like, this is now a one-way street or something. It's like, oh. Well, fuck. Mm-hmm. And sure, you could probably plot another route, but like, outdated maps, huge issue. Having an online map that is always up to date, and also oftentimes will have things like traffic jams on there, so you can like navigate around those. And also it automatically calculates the best route, which isn't always intuitive from looking at a map, right? Like sometimes you just have like, oh yeah, no, the traffic there is just bad. You just go around it, it looks longer, but it's actually faster.
Oh yeah.
Which I mean, to some sense...
I mean, I guess the best thing would be like e-ink foldable paper maps that still do GPS and like route calculation, but don't feature anything else.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm not necessarily that opposed to smartphones anymore. I'm just not... I probably still wouldn't take it with me everywhere, though. It's like, hey, I need I would probably use it very heavily for like certain things, like a map, right? Because again, I will maintain that like services like Google Maps, and I mean there are some alternatives, but like those sort of services are like the best version of that, right? Because dedicated navigational
that is true.
Like units, whatever there's a name for this, I think. But yeah, no, like those are also shit because those actually need updates usually. That oftentimes cost money. And it's like, there's free map. I mean, right? The internet age, right? Like, everything's free. There's no such thing as a free lunch, they say. Anyways, yeah, so that is the thing about smartphones that is relevant to this summer. All right, notifications very distracting. I was gonna say turn your phone to airplane mode, but I realized that online learning with airplane mode is gonna be difficult. Yeah, no, I personally
that can be, yeah.
I mean, PCs,
unless you have like an app that caches stuff offline.
I mean, the fact of the matter is,
like flashcard apps can do that, like some of them at least.
There's probably some app that allows you to just like turn off notifications for like a group of apps at once and then turn it back on. I guess you can turn off globally notifications. I don't know what happens though when you turn it back on if you get... Because I don't think it queues them up, right? So like you would still miss stuff, which is not always optimal, but then again...
like on my phone there's like a do not disturb mode, which just mutes the notifications. Yeah. It doesn't like hide them, it just mutes them.
I mean, it's a start. But yeah, no, there's something like that, right? Where... But yeah, ultimately, I think computer screens are also just like better from side standpoint. But I mean, people watch movies on phones, so like I don't know. But yeah, I mean,
also not everything is better on a computer. Like, especially for like language learning, if you're, for example, on Duolingo and the language you're learning has a different script than what your keyboard is, it can be quite difficult to type in it.
But Sergey, you want to get used
Because
to it.
there are some...
Okay, I know you can type Cyrillic, okay? But you just get used to it, okay? Like, it's not that hard. Like, I was never very fast at it. But, like, when I started learning Russian, I actually could type in Cyrillic. I also have since dropped off of learning Russian, which is why this topic is, like, eerily relevant to my life. But, I swear I'll get back to it at some point. Hopefully soon.
I have been thinking of, like, installing a phonetic keyboard layout for Russian or for Cyrillic, where it's like
I know
letters that sound kind of similar.
Yeah, those
are
exist.
placed on the same letters.
Those definitely exist.
Keys, yeah.
I had thought about it briefly, and then I was like, "That's stupid," and I just got the proper one. I mean, the keys aren't labeled on my keyboard, obviously, so you know. But honestly, typing in Cyrillic, I think you could get used to it fairly quickly. Especially
I don't know, man.
For me, the problem was I had to both think about where the letters are and how to spell things. You know?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes also just what words to use in the first place, right? So, like, yeah. Also, I mean, virtual keyboards are a thing, right? So you could also just have a pop-up keyboard on your desktop. Plus,
operating a virtual keyboard with a mouse is kind of dubious.
Fair. Honestly, the thing that I just did is I think it's a Wikipedia image or something, but like I just had an image of this Cyrillic keyboard layout, and I just threw it on my second screen, or like in another tab, and I would just like reference that, like when I was first started typing in Cyrillic, and after a while, you have to look at the keyboard less and less, and somebody could just do it. And
yes, but that doesn't really work if you only type in Cyrillic like maybe once or twice a week.
I mean, yes, obviously. I mean, yeah, I know you don't have to learn Russian anymore, but for me, right, like I was learning Russian for like a week or two. But
so you were doing like, yeah.
I did do some Duolingo, but I did also do some other things. I think the worst thing I did was I was like, you know, now that I was gonna say now that I've learned French, but people will think that I speak French like to some fluent degree because people always think that you either know a language or you don't. But now that I've learned French to a degree, and I felt ready to move on to the next language, at least from like an active learning standpoint. I mean, obviously you never stop learning any language, even your native one. But I was like, hey, you know, now that I've like learned French, I now know all of the good things and the bad things that I did, and I know where I can do better. And also sometimes like I can experiment a little bit with some new methods, right? Like to like try to optimize my learning method, and like obviously that didn't work. I think I like Anki in theory, but like actually making flashcards is so tedious that it basically doesn't seem worth it.
Just download a card deck from the internet.
I had thought about it, but at that point I might as well use memories, right? Like the whole Memrise is basically, I mean, yes, technically the actual like spaced repetition algorithm in Memrise I think isn't quite as refined as the Anki one. But it's not that different. It does use spaced repetition, it does have flashcards, but like it does have pre-built courses that, at least as far as the French course goes, is actually pretty good. And so and also there are like user submitted courses anyway, so like you can do whatever. The whole thing why I thought Anki was really cool is because it's built around the idea that you can make your own decks. I mean, I think you can build a Memrise too, but like it's anyways. But yeah, no, trying to make your own cards, especially when you have to like, you know, type what you wanted to say on there. I mean, I could have copy pasted, and I think I did in some cases maybe, but like you type it in there and you then have to type Cyrillic, and you're not very good at typing Cyrillic, and then you think you're really fancy because you want to also get audio because you want to know how to say the things, not just how to like read them. And so you record audio, and then you like, you know, you record the audio, you all normalize it to a certain audio level, you export it, you have to like then tell Anki to use the file. I think I made like 25 flashcards, and like, no, I'm just not going to do that anymore.
Just copy in the IPA.
I can't read IPA perfectly. I can somewhat read it, but I can't read it that well. Also, copying that in wouldn't necessarily be less effort because I would have to find it somewhere first, or I would have to actually know just hear what it sounds like and then type it out myself. Then I need an IPA keyboard. But trust me, there is no. I mean, there are people who swear by Anki, right? And including people that make their own flashcards. So clearly there's something to it. But anyways, sometimes the system that works for you might not be perfect, but if it works, don't mess with the running system, right? It's just let it do its thing. Because once the actual process of trying to build your learning environment becomes so frustrating that you don't even want to do it, you're not really learning anything either.
Mm-hmm. Right. Want to move on to the facts of the week?
I mean, yeah, I feel like I went pretty out there. What is your fact of the week?
It's actually surprisingly kind of related to languages and keyboards and stuff. So, back when Thailand first got their typewriters, they couldn't fit. Well, they would be Edwin Hunter McFarland, the guy that made the first typewriter for the Thai language. Couldn't fit all the letters onto the typewriter, even though he got the model that has the most keys.
Yeah.
On it, that was intended for the English language, I think, most likely, with uppercase and lowercase letters, punctuation, and numbers.
Yep.
And with all those letters, he still could not fit all the letters, the Thai letters, onto it. And so he dropped 2 of the lesser used consonants. I'm not going to try to pronounce them, because it's going to be so wrong anyway. But because of that, those 2 letters are practically obsolete in the language.
Okay. I mean, to be fair, there are a lot of languages that could use to drop some letters. What does the English language actually do letter Q for? I'm not sure that I can think of any language that needs it. I mean, Klingon, I guess, but in Klingon, the capitalization of letters matters, which is stupid because they only have 1 or 2 capital letters, and I think Q is one of them.
Wait, really?
Their planet is called Kronos, which is probably Q.
I didn't know that.
None of this is
pretty cool.
At all relevant, but I mean, no, English Q can just be replaced with K, right? Because it's almost always QU anyway, so it could just be KU.
I don't exactly agree. Would be KWU in most cases. But even that doesn't I don't know, it still has a distinct sound.
I mean, then there's the whole thing about C, right? But that's because C is always either K or is it even an? I think it's S sometimes, right? That's the whole thing where it's
yeah,
cinder,
cider, for example. Or cinder.
I love the words we came up with are 1 letter off. It's oh yeah, cider, or check it out in there, it becomes cinder. Yeah. Cider. It's a sharp S. English doesn't do sharp S's, right? So it would be a Z. Cider. Oh, that sounds wrong. Cider.
It's cider.
Doesn't matter. Right, so my fact of the week has nothing to do with keyboards, unless you wanted to. And that is about structural coloration, and most of the fact that it exists. Right, so you're used to pigments, right? They make colors. That's pretty normal, right?
Yeah.
Structural coloration is when, due to the geometric properties of a material, certain light reflects off of it and forms destructive patterns, and some of it forms constructive interference, right? So, okay, interference. When we talk about interference, we usually talk about destructive interference, right? Like two signals kind of cross and you can't really identify either of them. Constructive interference is when two peaks, when the peaks meet and line up perfectly, basically, so you just boost the signal. Destructive interference is basically the opposite happens, where the peaks hit the valleys and it just cancels out. Because waves. And so, because of the properties of how the light is reflected at certain angles, that can then produce a color, because it'll, like, some of the light will positively interfere and some will negatively interfere, and so some coloration will be muted and the other one will be amplified. That will also mean that oftentimes, when you have things with structural coloration, the viewing angle is going to affect the color. So sometimes you can have things where, like, if you actually, like, tilt it a little bit, like, the color changes. Which apparently, for example, peacock tails are, apparently they're brown, pigment-wise. And the blue is all structural.
Pretty cool.
Yes. Oh, yeah, I have the exact quote here. Peacock tail feathers are pigmented brown, but their microscopic structure makes them also reflect blue, turquoise, and green light, and they're often iridescent. Iridescent, of course, means that, you know, the what I just talked about, like the viewing angles, makes them change the color. That's what iridescence is. Bonus fact.
I thought iridescent means that it, like, emits light.
Nope. So, you know, there you've learned your fact of the week about the iridescent tones.
Yeah. Also, as, like, another thing to it, like, those are not the only two types of how color gets created. Like, pigments and iridescence. It's structure of material. There's, like, a whole other list of ways color gets created.
Okay, those are the three that I knew of. It's Squirtle time! I was gonna say we haven't done this in a while, but we haven't really done this.
While we were on the topic of constructive and deconstructive interference of light, did you know that you can actually perform the double slit experiment at home?
I mean,
like,
I would figure yes, why not?
Like, pretty easily even. Like, you only really need, like, a laser pointer. I mean, that's, like, actually that produces one frequency of light.
By the way, laser was our first word, of course, I've used.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's how we did in school. With a laser pointer and two slits.
Wait, you did the double slit experiment in school? Yo, that's cool. We didn't. I didn't know you could, like, easily just do it at home.
Yeah, it's a very simple experiment. I guess that's why you were surprised by that fact, because for me it's like, oh yeah. I mean I think we didn't just have like a box and a laser pointer. We had like a fancy lab laser or whatever. But like, I was like, yeah, I mean, of course, right? Like with the laser pointer, you'd probably have to make the room a bit darker so you can actually like see the light better. But same idea.
Yeah.
Light amplification is stimulated by the emission of radiation.
Yeah.
Wait, light amplification by the stimulated emission of radiation. I believe that's what it was. But yeah, no, laser hot. That's what laser's the acronym. Most people don't know that. I use it as a fact of the week once, and now I just keep telling people whenever I meet them. Yes, no.
I mean, taser is also like a loose acronym. something like Thomas A. Something something. I don't know. I don't remember. Electric rifle.
Okay, how about Squirtle? We already have 3 letters for the first column and 2 letters, well, 3 letters basically for the first row, because we already hit the A.
Mm-hmm.
The answer is rat. No, it's not. It actually can't be there, the R. So we also have some negative information on the R. It's just tarps. Oh no, wait, no S's. I think we had that before, but no S's is interesting.
Yeah, no I's or N's either.
I think S is the single most common consonant in the English language, isn't it?
Might be.
No I's, no N's, no S's.
I don't know.
This is a sin-free zone. I couldn't help myself.
That also means we have like no hints for the central row or column.
Which is what we're supposed to come up with next.
Yeah, that is amazing. Okay. What do we want? We probably want a U. Probably want a D. F, G, H. Maybe. I don't remember the letter frequencies.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really that important at this point, I think. I mean, the point is, right, we are more keen on getting an M than a Q, right? Like, that's really most of what we're looking for. And U obviously is very useful because it's the only remaining vowel, sort of. Don't act me. Y is frequently a vowel, and I think W sometimes is technically, if you ask a linguist, but like, don't. No, I mean, by all means do. It's actually not, but like, not relevant right now. So we said we wanted a U. We wanted, yeah, I think you mentioned like MGD, something like that. Which I believe gives us mud. Or dumb, which is already 4 letters. You know, I'm getting there.
Yeah.
Dumb. You know the elephant with the big ears? Oh, come on, don't tell me you don't know Dumbo.
Oh. I think I've heard of that.
I mean, the problem is it's a proper noun, right? So that wouldn't work. But gumbo might. That's something to eat. I mean, the fact of the matter is we're probably not gonna get this with a single vowel, right? Like, getting a 5-letter word with a single vowel is technically possible, I'm pretty sure, but you know, with all the letters that we wanted.
I mean, let's go for gumbo, I guess. Like, nothing to lose.
What the fuck? Right?
What?
The only letter that we knew already was in the grip was the O. Right, so we guessed a bunch of letters that seemed fairly frequent. Now, we don't have the exact signs of this, but none of them are in there.
What? Okay.
I don't think we've ever had a guess that is as bad as this one in terms of... I mean, I guess negative information is also information, but like, this seems like a terrible guess in terms of accuracy. I guess that's on me.
Wow.
I mean, damn.
I mean, at least we now have like a reasonable spot where the O can be.
Right there.
Mm-hmm.
By that same logic, there's a good spot for an E right there, and come to think of it, R's would make sense in these places, maybe.
Perhaps. Yeah.
I was gonna say water, but that doesn't really help all that much, does it? No U's or I's. We are fairly constrained on vowels. We're operating in a 3-ish vowel environment. Well, I mean, no.
I mean, having an E somewhere in this word would be pretty good.
I mean, taper would give us would test for T in the first row and column, which are places where it could go.
Oh.
It tests for A's, which we don't have that much information on. It tests for P, which we haven't tried yet. And it tests for E and R in the spots that I said.
I am a fan. Let's go for it.
I got the E's and the R's, but there's obviously no P. I mean, I'm just going to assume that there's also no Q, W, Z, D, F, H, J, K, Y, X, or V, because, knowing our luck. No, it's almost impossible, I would think, but...
Mm-hmm.
What letter comes after R?
That'd be an L.
L? I mean, that could... I was thinking like T or D. Or A, I guess, but that seems, It feels like there is not that much that could go in this corner, is what I'm getting at.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't just have to technically go behind R at some point ever, but like in at least 2 different words. We did also hit a lot of our positive information, which is a bit unfortunate. Like, all we know about the final row and column is that they need an R, and we already know where they are. Ha ha ha. That pun was not actually intended.
Took me a second. Yep.
Yeah. No O's in the final row or column.
Mm-hmm.
That means we're operating in a 2-vowel environment, but I guess for a single word, that's perfectly fine.
Do you want to try theory?
Doesn't Erie have an I in there somewhere?
Hmm?
You said Erie, right?
Theory.
Oh, Theory with a T.
T-E-A-R-Y.
Yeah, I get it. I just didn't hear you right.
Yeah.
I mean,
fine.
I don't see why not. I was gonna suggest something with a Y as well, so my Y, I think was somewhere else. I forgot. Oh yeah, no, I said I was thinking Hydra.
Mm-hmm.
Same idea, right? Like you have a Y in there, you have an A in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why we wouldn't get some coverage on the E and the A. I mean, it's obviously going to be annoying if the T is wrong, but then again, we then can narrow it down to 2 spots, which also helps. I mean, it was the correct word in one of those places. And we get an A in the other. Which also means that I mean, yeah, RY, so Hydra is definitely wrong. Go figure. Okay, so the T could go there or there. Since we now have one in the row, it doesn't need to go there. That doesn't necessarily mean that it thereby has to go there. I mean, there could be two T's there. I don't think we ever tested double T. Whoops. So this only is an R, and everything else we have. The R can't go there, but it could still go on both of those other ones. How many R's in tarot?
In what?
Tarot, you know, like the magical cards.
Is
there just one R or there
I think
two?
only one.
Because then it could technically work. For the row
It
that
could,
is.
yeah.
Obviously it couldn't work for the column because of the A is and also no R's.
I mean, do you want to just try it?
I mean, it does have two T's, which is not exactly optimal. But at the same time...
Oh yeah, we can replace the last T with something, like if it works.
Yeah, but it did occur to me, but like, I couldn't tell you Taroz, Tarod, Tarov, Taro, Tarok, Tarox, Tarov. I don't think there is necessarily another letter that would work there. I mean, we could also replace the A. Because, you know, we have the one A and the other one doesn't fit there anyways.
We can replace both of those.
At that point, you would expect there to be something there, right? It's like... I was going to say T-Rex, but that doesn't quite work because it has to still have the O. And the T-Rox would be something different, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think that adds up at all what I was saying, but T-Rex is only 4 letters. Well, it has a dash. Terror does have too many R's, though, doesn't it? Besides the fact that a final R wouldn't be any more helpful than a final T.
Yeah.
Terrov, Terrox, Terrod, Terrov, Terroz, Terro. Or Torov, Toror, Torot, Toroz, Torod, Torov, Toro, Toroi, Torok, Torol, Toroi, Torox, Torov. I don't think there's... I mean, if we want to go the tarot route, I don't think there's like a good alternative.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm pretty sure it is tarot.
Okay, I mean, in that case, I mean, we might as well try it. It's going to give us some more letters. I mean, obviously, yes, it's a bit awkward that we're solving both rows and columns separately, but like... Hey! You were more confident in that one than I was. I mean, I said it, but you were more confident.
I mean, I just, like, tried out, okay, what if the T is not in the first spot? Then, like, the R almost has to be in the first spot.
But it could also just be any... Oh, right, you mean for the... No, wait, what?
For the row.
I mean, it already had a T.
Yeah.
So, you could also just put, like,
I kind of
G there
just...
or something.
Yeah, right.
It could be Garot, which I'm pretty sure that one does have more letters somewhere. But...
Okay, well, never mind. I just, like...
Hey, you came
it worked
to
out
the
in the
right
end.
conclusion with the wrong logic and gave you the confidence to just use it.
It worked out in the end. Okay.
The first column also still needs an A and an E.
Mm-hmm.
It almost feels like the A goes in the bottom. Because it can't go there, it could go there, but if the O is correct, then unless it's like aorta, which there's technically
Could
nothing
be
speaking
aorta.
against. As a matter of fact, one of those two needs to be a T, although technically that one probably just says other.
Yeah,
Doesn't
this
it?
one's more likely. Oh, it's really aorta. Oh god.
What?
The row. Aorta. Aorta. Like I don't know how to properly pronounce this. The third row.
It doesn't have an H in it, does it? Or wait, does it have an H in it? Oh, it does have an H in it.
It does have
so it's
an
6
H in
letters. A-O-R-T-H-A. I was under the impression that for some reason,
Thank you.
I'm not sure if there's an H in there.
Thank
because
you.
My mind was like A-O-R-T-A, right? So as soon as the H appeared, I was like, it can't be aorta. And you were like, oh, so it is aorta. And yeah.
Yeah. In my defense, I'm like a little bit tired.
Fair enough.
So I'm not exactly thinking straight.
Okay, we have other. The one also needs an A, which I'm assuming goes here, because double A, especially double A-O, very dubious. So this one ends in
that central. Yeah, that central column row. I mean, by the way, also needs an R.
Yes,
I
that is
just
true.
noticed.
Which I guess would have to go there then.
Which, assuming, yeah.
Something about this doesn't quite seem right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always the option of putting the R there and putting the O there. No, but the O can't go there.
No.
But the O has to go there.
The O is actually fixed. Yeah.
Not what I meant. Oh, right, this is... I have to click on the hint first. Yeah, I'm also not 100%. So that would fix the R there. And frankly, don't love that. RH. Okay, so it is aorta, and I was right, and it doesn't have an H. And the other word is otter. Sounds about right.
Probably.
I mean, at this point, obviously, this T wouldn't have to be a T, but like what? I don't know what other letter that would go, to be honest. That we put there. Okay.
I don't know.
So we have an A there. We do have an A there. We have our T's. We don't have an E there yet. First column still needs an E.
Right now,
and it has to go there.
There's only one spot.
Unless the A is wrong. Which...
Do we just have theory twice?
A, that's not how that works, and B, there can't be an R in that column, so no.
There cannot be? Oh, right. Yeah.
I was about to say teams before realizing that both of those letters are not allowed.
It's really tough.
It's teach. Because we do need a C somewhere.
Oh, I didn't even notice it. Right. Yeah. It is teach.
I mean, I don't... I said that with way too much confidence, but I was gonna say Harry, but no eyes.
What? We just can't have two R's.
But Harry is in the name?
And then it's like, yeah.
I don't think this does proper nouns.
Why not?
Unless...
I don't know, we can try it.
I think there's 2 Harry, but I don't know that it's spelled.
And then the column is rarer. The row above it is cheer.
Rarer. It's cheer. And this is aloha. And then elate. The worst part is that could work. Let's see. So the L is allowed in both the row and the column. The H, we haven't tried before. The R there is also allowed in the, as a matter of fact, it's required in the row, and yeah, that's why we put it there. The T's are both allowed. The A on there I put there because we needed it. The R is also allowed. I don't see any obvious breaking of rules. What do you have? Aorta. Yeah, see, there is no H in aorta.
Yeah.
Cheer.
I'm pretty sure that there's gotta be.
You're a wizard, Harry. Okay, we had Tarot Elate. I love these. You know?
Mm-hmm.
With the black hints above them. I always love it when that happens. So elate, aorta, but Tarot, elate, aorta, cheer, Harry, teach, aloha, rarer, otter, teary. So now we only have to look up to know 100% what Harry is defined as, because I couldn't tell you. I mean, I know it's a word. I'm pretty sure. I mean, obviously now I know for sure define Harry.
Disturb, distress, or exhaust by repeated demands or criticism.
Harass. Yeah, that makes sense. Harass is literally the same root. Well, I mean, Harr. I'm assuming it's the same root.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, we did a thing. Which brings us to the second topic.
Ooh.
I think we actually did the squirrel fairly fast, despite the fact that it didn't really feel that fast. I mean, I guess at the end it was fairly fast. What's the weirdest internet rabbit hole you've been down?
I don't. There's been way too many.
There's been a lot, but the worst part is
way too many.
I don't think I've been that many recently, which makes it even harder. I mean, not just like, I mean, obviously weirdest ever, I guess would not necessarily have to be recent, but obviously, like, I can't even think of a recent time that I went down a rabbit hole, because that's immediately where my mind went. Like, I'm not going to come up with the obvious weirdest one, so it's like, what is a weird rabbit hole I went down recently? But like,
yeah,
I don't even know. I don't think. I mean, sometimes you get distracted. I feel like one of the worst places for that to happen is Wikipedia, because like you'll read a Wikipedia article about something because you want to just quickly know something, and then you end up learning about what was it? I remember reading about the electoral system in some Central American country, I think. I don't remember which one. Yeah, you know, right? Like,
that is pretty random.
Like, although to be fair, there's not that much of a rabbit hole, because I'm pretty sure I was looking up something that was like not even that unrelated, because I was watching an episode of Law and Order and they mentioned something about like a senator for life, and I'm like, oh, that's weird. And that's how I got there. I mean, I did also learn about the history of like the coups and shit that happened there, which obviously I also learned. I think it was Project Commodore, I think is what it's called. The when the Americans went and overthrew a bunch of South American and Central American governments. Now, I was already aware that they did that. I was just not quite aware of A, like just how organized it was, and B, the fact that it had a name for it, which I mean, I guess go figure, but like, I didn't know what the name was, I guess. So, like that whole thing, I guess, was sort of rabbit hole adjacent. I mean, it was all still somewhat on topic, but I definitely did, learn some things along the way that I wasn't necessarily looking for.
Yep. I mean, from my side, I'm not even sure if this really qualifies as going down an internet rabbit hole, but I have recently spent quite a bit of time customizing my PS1 and PS0 string in the Linux terminal. That is the prompt that you see every time you enter a command.
Okay.
Like, usually it's just like the username at the host name of the machine you're on, and then like the path of the folder you're in.
Seen that before,
followed by like a $, space, and then you type in your command and everything. And you can do quite a lot of stuff with it. That also looks pretty cool. And so I've been looking up at like different ways to customize it, all the possible ANSI escape codes that exist, and obviously the long list of exceptions and asterisks on each one, where like some are only supported on certain computers and not others. Because obviously, why would it be easy? And yeah, I've been doing that recently. I think I've got something pretty cool looking that is also practical. Tells me not just by the in text which user I'm logged into as, but also by the color, signifying that if I'm logged in as root, that hey, you might want to be more careful with what you type in. As well as like just regular bash shenanigans with like auto-completion for certain commands. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, that definitely sounds in the spirit of the question. I would say that, yeah. Yeah, I can't come up with anything else right offhand. It's probably not the weirdest that I ever had, but like it's definitely like a recent one that I can at least think of. So, you get that one.
Yeah.
What are the conditions of something to be considered alive? I think there's two ways to interpret that question. Well, I guess there's one main way that's probably intended to be interpreted, and another sort of adjacent question that might be clumsily worded that way as well. Okay, so I guess they're talking about alive versus dead, right? Like, which I believe sort of the standard medical definition has to do with heartbeat. It's a whole thing where like, oh, he died by cardiac arrest. Like, yeah, no, that's the definition of being dead. Your heart stopped beating. Now, technically, you can survive just fine without your heart beating, right? If you say, have something implanted that pumps the blood instead, right? Like, there are pumps that actually don't like do the beating thing, but still like pump your blood around. I don't think those are meant to necessarily pump all your blood, but I think they can, at least for some time. Right, so like,
I don't know.
There are obviously edge cases, but like generally speaking, it's like, heartbeat, like electrical function of the brain, right? Like that sort of a thing. At least for humans, it's a fairly straightforward thing. Now, obviously, plants don't have any of that. So,
I mean, bacteria don't either.
Metabolic activity.
I guess, yeah. That works.
Now, the other question that I was thinking is possibly more interesting is actually, like, what makes something living in the first place, right? Which I guess boils down to the question of, are viruses alive or not?
Yeah,
Because as far as I know, there is like genuine like scientific disagreement about whether viruses are life forms or not. Now, for all I know, that's like someone told me once, and it's actually like is fairly clear cut. But it does seem like every time you hear someone talk about it, they're like, "Yeah, I'm not exactly sure." because they don't reproduce, but they also do, right? Like which is usually like the thing where like there are systems that operate independently, but they don't usually reproduce, right? And so making more of the organism is usually seen as a sign of life, but also viruses don't make more viruses, but they do hijack existing cells and turn them into viruses. So they do still replicate. They just don't do it in the same way that any other life form does. I would argue viruses are alive. But, like, yeah. I mean, computer viruses also replicate. Although they are
not necessarily, but
well, a lot of them do, not all of them, but like usually when you get a virus, you like a file downloads itself, or you download a file or something, and then that has a virus system. But like that's obviously just a copy because it's a download, right? Like you don't move files off of a server. You just So yeah, like as far as biological organisms go, though, I think like the replication thing is probably a good indicator for if something is alive. And I would argue that even if viruses don't replicate in the traditional sense, they do still replicate. They replicate. They have RNA. They don't have DNA, but I think most viruses don't have DNA. I think there might be some that do, but generally they have RNA. I think they do loosely follow what we would consider life things, and
I don't know. I'm on the edge of it.
I mean, I'm not too firm on it, but I'm leaning more towards life, definitely. How does a car engine work? Like
it's like little hamsters in it, spinning wheels.
I mean, basically, right? Little explosion makes cylinder go up, right? Like that's. I think that's how that works. And then that motion.
Yeah. Something like that.
I never needed to know that. I mean, the fact of the matter is, usually does work, and that's all that matters to me. Also, it depends on what you're talking about. Are you actually talking about the internal combustion engine, or are we talking about, say, an electric motor? Would electric motors be considered engines?
True, right?
I don't know. Like, is there a difference between a motor and an engine? Like, some people have jet turbines in their cars. I mean, like, by some people, probably, like, literally only a handful, but those do technically exist.
True.
I was gonna say there are some with hydrogen cells in them, but I realized that those only make electricity, and then you still have an electric motor that actually powers the car. So I can tell you how the hydrogen cell works, because when hydrogen and oxygen react, they release energy, and if you do it through a membrane, it doesn't explode, but instead just slowly produces energy, and then you can use that to power to like fill up your batteries, basically. But or instead of a battery. But by the way, that is still my favorite pitch for like a futuristic car, I guess. Hydrogen powered, but the hydrogen is used as it usually would be to make electricity, and there's an electrical motor, but you also have a battery, right? So my idea is it's basically an electric car, but you can also take hydrogen to like, and so the idea is you're supposed to refill it with hydrogen, but especially during the transitional phase, when there's not a lot of hydrogen availability, you could also just charge it like the regular car charger way. Now, obviously, in effect, I just added an extra.
Cool,
in fact, I just added an extra system to an electric car that if we take it out, leaves more space for either like trunk space or for like a bigger battery. So that only really makes sense if hydrogen ends up being either more energy efficient or more compact than like batteries. But the advantage is, batteries are kind of like a pain in the ass to produce, like materials wise, and also like not very environmentally friendly to produce. Not as bad as like a car like that burns fuels over a lifetime, but it's still like the hydrogen could replace some of the battery space, and I think hydrogen production is not entirely trivial either, but it's basically just electricity, and the emission from a hydrogen car versus a combustion car, it's water, which is technically also greenhouse gas, but I believe it usually produces liquid water because it's not that hot, so it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I'm pretty sure water vapor is a stronger greenhouse gas than CO2, but I believe it also doesn't stay in the atmosphere the same way that CO2 does, because it rains down again, so it doesn't really matter as much.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's technically a stronger greenhouse gas than CO2. CO2 is actually one of the weakest greenhouse gases. Like, methane is so much worse, but even water is technically worse. But again, like, it's just CO2 is the one that we also have the most of in our atmosphere. In what ways?
How many more do we want to do?
I don't know. Let's do like 2 more and then call it a day. How about that? In what ways do you
Sounds
think
good to me.
the current generation is different from your generation? Okay, please define the current generation.
Mm-hmm. I may or may not be part of it still.
Because, like, what? Like, I would argue generation is current if there are people of it alive right now, which, like, is a bunch of generations.
Mm-hmm.
Also, anyone who would read the question would necessarily thereby be of a current... Like, I'm assuming they mean on the younger
newest
end, presumably. But is it, like, the very youngest? Because now we're talking about school children. Or is it, like, the youngest adult generation, which is us? Like... When does Gen Z and / Generation Alpha start? Generation Alpha use the early 2010s as starting birth years. So we're talking about kids that are roughly 10. How are they different from our generation? They're still literal children.
Basically.
Which also makes it very hard to, like, come up with any definite characteristics. So, generational differences are of 2 natures. Some of them are just age differences, which inevitably are also generation differences, but over a generation's lifespan, those won't be the same. Right? Because there are things that are just generally true about young people, whether they belong to Gen X or Gen Z or, like, Gen Alpha, I guess. I also skipped over millennials because, I don't know. Because I didn't have Black Winter. But, so those differences obviously are just age dependent. There are also broader differences. And obviously, generations are somewhat arbitrary. And so, obviously, especially as you get towards the edges, those might not be perfectly matches, but there are general trends that change over time. And those would then be more generational. But Generation Alpha is just too young to determine those. So, yeah. So, generally, right, like Gen Z and millennials are fairly similar, I would argue. A lot of the differences are fairly superficial. Gen X, no one really seems to care about. Like, they never get talked about that much, so it makes it harder for me to say anything about them. And obviously, the boomers kind of suck these days. Is it the silent generation that's that's immediately above the boomers? I think so, right? Yeah, the silent generation.
Yep.
I mean, the names as well, right? You don't hear a lot about them. The greatest generation, obviously, they fought in the war. So, what do I feel like a lot of it is just like older people versus younger people, and that is independent of the actual generation that you're part of. And I say versus as in, like, distinguishment, although there is oftentimes animosity as well. Yeah, I think generally the big generational differences right now are just that, like, younger people tend to, like, actually care more about the future, which probably is a general younger people trait, but, like, feels particularly relevant when, the planet is burning. Literally. Although, some amount of forest fires some places is actually good and blah, blah, but, like, there's too many forest fires. Also just too much heat in general. Like, So, like, that seems like a big generational difference, right? Like, you also have, like, a lot of general, like, the more socially progressive, but that's also very common for younger generations to be more socially progressive in general. And, of course, with everything, those are just generalizations. but like older generations still have all of the like wealth and political power, so that sucks.
That it does. That it does.
You know what would suck less? If we were given unlimited resources and would go about making the world a better place. But how would we do that?
Unlimited resources in what way? Is it just money or actual, like, physical material?
I was gonna say money is a good proxy for just about any resource, but I realized that obviously some resources are actually limited. And so if you have unlimited money, then obviously that becomes more... Because, like, right now, if you were just, like, filthy rich, most things would be accessible to you.
Mm-hmm. And also, like, if it's, like, already made material, you wouldn't necessarily have, like, all the bad implications of, like, first having to mine for it, for example, and then processing it.
Yeah, that's true. Although I feel like we're mining for certain things that we also just don't need to. Oil and gas are like kind of tricky because we do still need them. Maybe not as much as we use, but we do definitely need them for now to some degree. But like diamonds, like why don't we keep mining for diamonds? I guess there are industrial implications, but like you could just grow them. I know the suffering is what makes it special.
Given unlimited resources, like more research into nuclear energy, different types of nuclear energy, more electric cars, generally electric vehicles, less vehicles, better city planning, more walkable cities, better public transport.
You know what? Hyperinflation. That sounds bad.
I don't know. I'm not a big fan of that. Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm German. I understand. Okay, it's bad. Here's the thing, right? We're just gonna devalue all money, just all of it. I was thinking, right? Like, obviously, the thing you want to solve is income inequality, right? Like, that's, I mean, not the only thing, but like, that would help a lot. That would also help with redistributing power to like all the people that don't have as much power right now, which is to say, like, you know, younger people and minorities. And those are people that generally have more progressive politics. Again, on a group level. So a lot of the like climate change stuff, you know, if the oil billionaires wouldn't be oil billionaires anymore, that would be very helpful, right? And so obviously, redistributing wealth is difficult. The easiest way to do it is by raising everyone up to the level that the highest people are at right now, which would mean making everyone billionaires, at which point money is basically worthless, which is fine. Problem is, you'd still have like actual like tangible assets. It's always the problem, right? Where like hyperinflation should hurt the rich the most because they have the most money and it devalues money, but they also have the most of everything else.
Yeah. Also, it's not like they have most of that money just lying around in the bank account. It's usually tied up in stuff.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah. Obviously, if you crash the international financial market, stocks do lose their value, but also you do have actual stakes in companies. Honestly, the whole capitalist system is kind of fucked if you think about it, but that's maybe a bit of a... I mean, I feel like the trick would just actually be, though, to some degree, to actually, like, you know, try to still, like, solve inequality to at least a degree, right? Like, even if we don't want to, like, blow up everything, which, you know, sometimes feels like it's the best idea. Probably, the problem is, right, like, if you blow up the entire international financial system, it's going to have catastrophic immediate consequences. It's probably going to lead to violence, right? Revolutions are never good in, like, the short term, even if long-term implications are good. So you would want to try, like, avoid the bad stuff while still, like, fixing the system. The problem is, a lot of the problems that we have are, like, systemic. And so they're very difficult to solve. And while
Oh, yeah.
giving everyone free electric cars is nice and probably does actually help the environment, especially if we can summon them out of thin air and don't have to actually like manufacture them, because exchanging your perfectly good car for an electric car is actually not good. You should like wait until you actually need a new car before getting one of those. But it's like that's not gonna solve everything, especially because cars, while still not great for the environment, are like by far not the worst thing. You got like textiles, meat, and like planes. Like there's a lot of things that are like worse than cars.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, yeah, I guess food would be good, right? Like let's get some food to the global south, especially where grain is a bit tricky at the moment. I don't know if you've heard anything about that. So there's definitely. I do think you're right of like accelerating the movement away from fossil fuels is definitely one thing. I do think that again, right, a lot of the inequality stuff should be helped to some degree, and that will necessarily cause some inflation. And inflation shouldn't be bad to a point, at least. It's like people always complain about inflation, right? But in theory, inflation is the best thing that can happen to poor people, right? Because it devalues the money of rich people, and if you're in debt, it actually devalues your debt, right? So the problem is, whenever we have had inflation lately, we didn't really have inflation in the truest sense, because prices went up, but wages didn't.
Yep.
Because if your purchasing power is the same, but the value of the currency inflates, then people that don't have wealth profit from it, while people that have wealth like suffer from it, right? Like, I mean, suffer. Rich people don't suffer. Not in the same ways that, but that would actually have benefits. But that's just not how the world tends to work these days. I mean, I feel like you would have to try to almost hijack a lot of those systems, right? And just like make them work your way. And then obviously we're getting now much more tangibly into the power thing rather than the assets thing, and that obviously supposedly power corrupts.
Mm-hmm.
It's a thing where like you kind of want to undermine a lot of the like nefarious interests that are around to like make systems better, but at the same time that gives you a lot of power that you then have to use very carefully. And also you can't do the thing where you like set up a successor that might be worse. So you have to plan for the fact that you won't have the power forever. There are some easy ways to make the world immediately better for some people, at least. But it's gonna be very difficult to like make any like big change, like just on a whim. Like just giving poor people money is like huge. But there are only so many poor people you can give so much money to before you start wrecking everything as well. So,
I mean, at that point, just build a better community in the cities that have a lot of poor people.
I mean, yes, but oftentimes the things that are most hostile to them are like, the laws and police and local politicians. It's like,
yeah.
I mean, I guess donate to campaigns that are against, but like, political change is tough. I feel like sometimes it would be the best to just start over, right? Like, just like, dismantle like all the structures, like all the power structures, and just like get everyone together and like build it anew. But like, obviously, the people in power are never gonna let that happen.
That is also true. Oh man.
Also, can someone please just take Elon Musk's power away? I don't know how I necessarily do that much. I mean, I guess I know one way to do that, but we don't necessarily need to go there. Like, seriously, like, that guy is, like, actually dangerous. Like, both in terms of the stuff he's done to Twitter, which, like, has led to, like, more misinformation And like, I get, right, like a lot of like him burning down Twitter is fun and whatnot, but like there is actually like more disinformation, like more hateful content, right? Like there's like Twitter has gotten objectively worse, and it's still an important information also people, right? So misinformation is actually bad. At the same time, he's has a contract with the U.S. military to provide Starlink to Ukraine, and then like when he like turns it off as matters when he feels like it, because I don't know, he wanted to stop an attack like from the Ukrainians against the Russians. Like, so they were sending maritime drones to attack a boat, I think, and there's obviously control over the internet because you need like long distance communication, and the internet just happens to be there. And so he just shut it off like while the drone boats were like going out, and then just deactivated because they had no more connection. And I don't know if that was already at the time when the US was like directly above the contract, but like you're contracted to provide those services, right? Like you can't just shut them off because you feel like it. See, that guy has too much power. I mean, there's others like that, right?
Yeah,
like,
he really does.
Like people like Jeff Bezos also have a lot of power, but like Elon Musk has happened to do a lot of things that are very public facing, or at least to a degree public facing, right? Like that are also like very like like when Amazon lobbies for like fewer workplace protections or like anti-union stuff, is like that's bad, right? But that I can at least kind of like it makes sense for them to do that, like logically, and also they are still like even if like the whole lobbying thing's kind of shady, like they're still somewhat doing it through proper channels, but like just buying up like one of the biggest open communication platforms and just like changing the moderation policy to the point where like misinformation is rampant, and where it's harder to find credible information as well because you have to like buy a checkmark to actually be seen in replies and shit like that. Well, to be up top in the replies, but like no one scrolls down. Not that far at least. Then also has like one of the biggest internet systems. I mean, maybe not the biggest providers in terms of like number of users or like number of data present, but like one of the few, if possibly the only, like actually global network that I can think of, like internet wise, as a provider that he has like apparently very granular control over. And also, like, he does censorship for the Saudis and stuff on Twitter, and he censors stuff for India, and you know, like, it's like Twitter, him owning Twitter and SpaceX, especially for Starlink, are like two of the most dubious things out there because of just the amount of power that he exerts with it. Like, that's wild, right? And again, right, that's just some of the more publicly known stuff, the stuff that rich people do behind the scenes. I mean, we kind of understand at least some of it, but, you know, like, oil lobbyists literally, or oil companies literally, like, financing disinformation campaigns that, like, say that climate change is fake, like, for decades. Like, they knew, like, their direct impact on climate change much before that was, like, public knowledge. I mean, climate change as a concept was, like, fairly early known about, but, like, a lot of the, like, this is the exact ways that it happens. This is like literally we are like one of the biggest causes for that. Like that sort of stuff I don't think was as probably known at least, and like actively keep it under. Some people have too much power. Yeah, so Sergej's internet cut out because I rambled too much about politics, which is probably not relevant anyway. So let's move on to the songs of the week. Hey,
yes. Okay,
what is your song of the week?
Well, I know you're gonna be... You're not gonna like this one. Because you've already told me that. A long time ago, but... Yeah, I still like it. And the song is... Ekna Lubma by They Might Be Giants.
Make way, and stand aside. The crowd takes up the cry. He comes. Bow down, and lower your eyes before the litter borne by men in fancy uniforms. A chavvy hit from which a siren warns. The eagle flashing lights and royal horns.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not the biggest They Might Be Giants fan.
Mm-hmm.
It's good because I don't really see the appeal. I guess their songs are supposed to be clever, funny.
Funny, yeah.
Doesn't really do it for me. I mean, I do kind of like Road Movie to Berlin, which is like random, but like it's the only song I can think of from theirs that I actually like. But I guess I just don't like them that much musically, which is a big start. And then I think
I mean,
also
that is fair.
I think the humor also doesn't lie with me that well, so that's a bad combination.
I mean, all are fair things. So yeah.
Anything else you want to say about this one?
What is your song of the week?
My
Not
song
really, no.
of the week is "What Makes a Good Man" by The Heavy.
Pretty good.
Yeah, I think I heard the song recently, and I was like, you know what? When I was thinking of a song, I was like, you know what? I think The Heavy. That's probably a good call. And you know, "What Makes a Good Man" maybe their best song. It's one of the two best songs for sure. And I was feeling it. Then I saw that I'd already made the clip. Like I saw that when I was gonna download the album cover, I was like, that I already had it. And I was like, did I already make a clip for this? Through it. I don't know, 168. So that was what? That's actually pretty much halfway between now and 0. It's like 150.
That's a long time ago.
6 episodes ago, right? So it's like it's not quite half, but yeah. Yeah, I guess it's about 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
But then you know,
That's
then
a long time.
I thought about it, and I was like, I have a better idea for a song, and I do quite like this one, and it's been 3 years, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I just renamed the old file, and which I didn't really need to do, but it makes it easier to insert it into the whatever. Doesn't matter. So yeah, The Heavy. It turns out they're not very popular, or at least not very well known. I guess I don't know. So I had primarily known them, to be fair, from the Borderlands video game franchise, right? Borderlands 2 in particular, they had. I think this was the pre-sequel credit song or something. So Borderlands 2 onward, I think. I don't think Borderlands 1 used any music from theirs, but the Borderlands franchise heavily utilizes their music. Heavily. And that's where I knew the music from, and it turns out they did have a couple of songs that like barely charted some places, but it doesn't seem like they were like that successful, but they do actually have some pretty good songs.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, this episode of the Trash Talk Podcast comes to a close. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to the channel. If you haven't already, if you like this video, give it a like. That's not the order in which I'll go. And if you want to talk to us, leave a comment or join us. Whatever links in the description below. Sergej.
That's it.
That's it.